Good morning, Hallowed Haven family. This is After Dawn, the show where we sit down to have a cup of coffee with the cast, crew, and creators behind the Hallowed Haven Studios productions. I'm Sol, and I'm joined by my co-host, Scott.
Hello, yes, I am Scott. Today we're talking about Scion Apotheosis, episode 5, an episode in which time got a little bit wibbly wobbly, didn't it? Yeah, it was an interesting episode. I actually was enjoying all of the role playing that went on in the episode and the back and forth and the talking, and it did feel like we're setting up for something pretty cool. So I thought it was great. It was fun, but like all the episodes of Apotheosis are fun. What do you think, Saul?
I definitely agree. I also definitely think that all the back and forth and all the talking and it seemed a little more chill, which I think was needed after the multi-car explosion and murder that happened very recently. And especially the big first fight as a group with everyone throwing in their best weight, including Oliver, who did quite well to act as a leader and to support his compatriots. Speaking of, today we are joined by Oliver's player Gary and Dyvir, the
Hello.
individual who played as Ogma.
Hey.
How's it going?
Pretty good. Pretty good.
Very good. Very good. Well, now that we're all here, I wonder what I think you may all be wondering why I've gathered you here.
What?
Good.
No,
I knew
don't see-
already.
We're so vastly different. There's no connection between the two of us.
All right, Gary, since you have now had a few episodes, how do you think the campaign is going overall?
I think it's phenomenal. I just heartily enjoy it so much. It's very special to me, and it's a fun thing that I look forward to every single week. It's just been so enjoyable from a story and game perspective. Just the entire time. Like, I'm both loving the system and loving the story that's being told.
Yeah, it's good. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Saul. Go ahead.
Perfectly fine. I was just going to say that it is a fantastic story, and I'm very glad that you're enjoying it. How do you think Oliver feels about Ogma being his parent? Now that he has met him a little bit and now understands a little more where he came from and has experienced a little more of actually what it is to be a god, or a godling at least.
I think Oliver thinks it's very fitting. He certainly believes it makes sense that the pieces do line up there, and so as he kind of learned more about Ogma as a god as well, he probably thinks that it's the best fit for him out of all of the sort of intellectual based gods, minus the whole like warrior aspect, but that's all the Celtic pantheon. So he's slowly getting there though because of his Gaius being like, you need to know how to fight, and so he's like, okay, bad things will happen if I don't, according to this Gaius, so I will.
It's fair enough.
Yeah.
Diver, first off, welcome to our show for the first time.
Yeah,
Thank
welcome.
you for having me.
Glad to have you. So, as Ogma, what sort of preparations did you undertake to really embody the role of Ogma?
I'm happy to answer that question as soon as I get my coffee here. This is a coffee shop, right?
It's true.
It is a coffee shop.
Okay. Well, I'll have a venti caramel latte, 2 pumps honey blend, extra caramel drizzle, extra caramel crunch, 2 extra shots, double blended, extra whip, and make sure to add just 1 tablespoon of frat chips.
Oh, you're one of them, aren't you?
Yes, exact
I'll have a
measurements,
beer.
please. Getting on to the question, there was a lot of preparation, at least for me, for Ogma. This is my first time even like touching Scion, honestly. So, like, not only was it like, oh, I need to understand this whole thing, but also like this tactician, divine genius who basically knows everything, or at least thinks he does. And so, I did a lot of research on him and. Also like the gifts that he would give to Oliver and what kinds of things he might say, because Oliver, up to this point at least, I've been following the show since episode 1, and of course um, Oliver's always suggesting great audiobooks and everything to play for, the group, and it's all into literature like any good, high school English teacher should be. And I was like, okay, so I was going to have like all kinds of cool Irish literature texts and everything in case Oliver is into that. Of course, during the episode, Oliver never even once asked to see even one of those. But so like I was all ready with that. Like I had Dracula and the picture of Dorian Gray and ghost stories and Swift and Wild and Joyce and all of it. So like it was just like I was ready with that, and all that stuff. So yeah, I did a whole like download of like Irish mythology and how famous stories and everything that Oliver might want to know. And then of course most of that never really came up. So yeah, that was my research for Ogma. Like he was gonna bring everything to the table there.
It sounds like that was like a couple of months worth of research, but that you did in a
Yeah,
short
I
time.
basically did the Matrix thing of just downloading it into my brain in one night. So yeah.
Well, since we're getting to know you and Ogma, I've heard that Ogma created the Gaelic script like Ogham. So here's a question. This is actually a question about you as a person related to this. If you were to create a language based on yourself, what kinds of vocabulary and phrases would be predominant in it?
Wow, that's not a question I was actually ready to answer. Like, okay, and create a whole language by myself.
Hmm.
Honestly, I think it would be a language that would welcome all kinds of creativity from its users, like phrases that people just make up, kind of like English, really. Like I
Hmm.
honestly like I've got some education in English. I was actually a literal English teacher myself, and so yeah, I have an appreciation for it and all the little phrases that get added to like the Oxford English Dictionary every year and all that stuff. So yeah, I mean, it would be a language like that that just no holds barred, just blends together whatever it wants and it makes up and breaks rules whenever it wants as well. For me, that's just kind of how I like to roll. And so yeah, something like English adjacent, I think. Uh, you know, um, with the addition of words that have no particular reason to be spelled or pronounced the way they do, like English sometimes, and so yeah, something like that, I guess, just off the top of my head.
Yeah, I mean, what you're kind of describing is like in a lot of like cyberpunk fiction and stuff, you get this like street language. It's like an amalgam of all the languages, kind of. Like if
Right.
you've ever seen like Blade Runner, there's like the street talk thing that he
Absolutely.
uses. Yeah, that's kind of what it
Yeah,
sounds
yeah,
like you're describing. Yeah.
yeah, exactly. It would be a more developed kind of cant with that kind of language. That's how I would roll. Now, when I think of Agma, I think of just like this kind of systematic, like when I researched, I was like, okay, the guy developed language and everything else. My mind went immediately to, for example, like the language that Phoenicians developed, the alphabet and all that stuff. And then, of course, I've had a number of years in studying Latin, which is a very systematic language. I thought, yeah, this might be, but then, he's an Irish god. So I thought, oh, well, maybe he
Mhm.
has an appreciation for like more colorful, kind of fast and loose languages as well. So, like, it was kind of like, on one hand, it's very systematic and kind of at least the kind of divine personages that I think would dot all the I's and cross all the T's, but at the same time, he's got to love the whole colorful uh, aspect of language too. So yeah, it's a little bit of both worlds there.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
Completely makes sense to me. So, first off, Gary, what do you have to say for yourself for disappointing your dad?
Whoa, whoa,
And
whoa,
asking
whoa,
about all
whoa!
this?
Hey, whoa.
Spilling the tea already, are we?
I'll still answer. I'll still answer because
No, it's all good.
from Oliver's perspective at that moment is that Oliver, when he's talking about literature, which is mostly all the time, the only time he really won't talk about it is when he's in a situation where he's out of his depth. And to him, being in a place where there's little gods all over the place and he's speaking to his father, who is a god, is 100% out of his depth. So at that moment, his main concern was more or less survival, making sure he got out of there without screwing up royally. So he wasn't thinking about literature at the time. But if Ogma were to come up again later on, he might be a bit more comfortable, more aware of what's going on in his life now to be able to be like, yes, let's talk literature. And so that's kind of where his headspace was at during that conversation.
Oliver was just a little intimidated.
Yes.
I mean, if someone were to be like, "Hey, go in this room," oh yeah, you're gonna meet a god there, I would also be like, "Oh, what now?"
Yeah, not just a
And the
god,
god
the
is
god
your
with the
father.
biggest brain. Yeah, that too.
Right.
Yeah.
The guy who knows everything. He's planned 300 moves ahead.
Yeah, don't challenge him to chess. He's already beat you.
Yeah,
me.
He
exactly.
beat you before you asked him to chess.
He knew you were going to ask him and then beat you before you ever sat down.
I knew you were going to ask, and I know you're going to start with the king's pawn opening, followed by, and it's like, I haven't even moved
That's
anything
right.
yet.
Exactly.
Why do I even bother?
I didn't even know there was a chessboard in this room.
I already had it set up. I knew you would ask.
Mate and 8 moves.
Yep. So,
Well, oh, go ahead, Saul.
I have actually a secondary question for Gary. We've heard some people had their preferred pantheons, or like what would have been like if they hadn't gotten this, what they would have preferred. What are your feelings about the Celtic pantheon, or what would your next choice be? I know a lot of people are thinking might have been Athena.
I would have liked Athena. I think Athena would have been cool. So yeah, maybe the Greek pantheon, but like I didn't know anything about the Celtic pantheon going into the game, and then having begun to learn about it through Scion itself, I've kind of fallen in love with it. I really enjoy the Celtic pantheon. I think it's very cool. This concept of Gaius and how it operates, and all the different gods and what they do and how they operate. It's just, I think it's a very, very cool pantheon, and so I'm really interested in it, and I really like it. So I don't think I would replace it for any of the other ones. But if there were to be a second choice, I'd probably go with Greek with Athena. I've always really liked Athena as a Greek god.
Hope that doesn't piss off Ogma anyway.
Sounded very judgmental.
No. Well, no. Ogma is pretty secure in his superiority there.
For sure. That actually leads me to a question on that subject. Like you did all this studying and downloading before. Were you familiar at all with the Celtic pantheon before you took on the role?
Not too much. It was only a passing familiarity. It's not one that I've looked into too much, but it was really enjoyable for that reason. Like when I was told weeks ago, like, okay, you're going to be Ogma, and I was like, oh, okay, that's cool. Who is this guy? And then I dove into it, and so there was a lot of interesting reading there, in terms of Fen McCool and the different, like, the stories of the Giant's Causeway and all that stuff, and the Tuatha De Danann, which I actually knew about before this, but just only in passing, as someone who's for example, like, covered Ulysses and the Dubliners in educational setting, in actual educational setting. Like I took it upon myself to at least kind of in a cursory way, like, give my students a chance to get familiar with, Irish culture and mythology and things like that. So, yeah, it was a nice, for me, the novelty of it was really the main appeal. Is like, oh, I get to learn about something new here, something I'm not as familiar with. So yeah, I kind of jumped at that. It was, and then when I found out that Ogma is basically like, okay, he's responsible for creating the language. I'm like, oh, well, this is my wheelhouse. I actually have degrees in this, so, like, I understand where he's coming from here. And then he's a tactician, and I'm like, oh yeah, okay, this is an easy fit for me. Like, it's like I don't need to role play too much. I don't need to stretch my imagination too much to kind of get into the mindset of this person. So yeah, it was a nice kind of new set of things to learn about, which was colorful and interesting. And then also just trying to inhabit the mind space of this deity of who is like all about his literature and all about his strategy and all about his knowledge of things, that type of quality that he emphasizes and would look for in others. It's like, oh, okay, so he's just basically uber professor and also really all in on the language thing. I can do that.
Yeah, my familiarity with the Celtic Pantheon comes from the Iron Druid urban fantasy novels initially. But then I got hired to write an adventure for a Call of Cthulhu book that was supposed to take place in like old Ireland with like Roman soldiers. So I ended up doing like a bunch of research on like the Roman invasion of Ireland back like in 67 AD.
Yes. Yes.
And there's a lot of, because it's Call of Cthulhu, there's a lot of the like mix in of the mythology. And so fortunately, like I had some place to stand on because of the Iron Druid series of novels. But then I could do research from there. Of course, like anything in Cthulhu world has like a twist to it, but it did lead me to understand. So when I heard the name, I was like, okay, I am passively familiar with this person. And so I Googled during the episode and I was like reading some of like the brief stories. And I was like, I know these places that they're mentioning because Romans attacked it in the adventure I wrote. So I'm like, oh, cool. Very cool.
That's a neat connection.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very cool. Cool. So you're saying then when you took on the role of Ogma, it was actually pretty easy to step into it because you kind of felt like a connection to that.
Yeah.
role.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, I had some graduate degrees and things like that in basically teaching of literature and things like that. So yeah, for me it was like, oh, okay, this guy's all about that. And also I have, I appreciate like strategy games. I've seen some things around here, like some invitations to play Civilization, that sort of thing. So, anyways, I
Always
yeah,
open for anyone.
right, exactly. And I might just take you up on that at some point, soon here. It's just I've been really very busy, but so yeah, put that in your cap there. But basically, yeah. So for me, it was as soon as I understood kind of what his wheelhouse was and what he was all about, I was like, oh, this is a great fit. I'm not even going to have to struggle with this too much, and I'll get to learn something cool about his place in the Irish pantheon and everything like that, and really inhabit the space of someone that I haven't done before and wouldn't have if it wasn't for this opportunity and on this Apotheosis series. So I really appreciate it. For me, it was like, and then the gifts. I was originally, I had 3 picked out, and then I was originally going to one of them was originally going to give Oliver a little bit of a little bit of extra strength, but it was decided that he would get another type of like insight knowledge based gift as well, because he tends to be more of a knower and a supporter than a than someone who is more likely to save someone spinning around on a rope and carry them off like a kitten.
Yep.
So just to reference our latest episode. So
No, absolutely.
yeah. So that's kind of how we decided on like the monocle, because I thought, oh, that'll be cool because he's got a whole eyesight thing going on, and then of course the book, which seemed to me to be perfectly understandable, and of course the pendant turned into something for him to use his epic intelligence and everything to address certain challenges that came up. So yeah, and also it was kind of last minute, but when the book was developed as a gift, I don't know how much I'm allowed to say, so I'm just going to spill all of it. But like when the book was developed, it also kind of brought together like Oliver's like witchy aunt. Like the Morgan, like it's just like, oh, okay, and she's involved there. So it's kind of interesting that Ogma is dad, and the Morgan I like to think of as like this kind of aunt figure, like she's just very witchy aunt. So like yeah, it surprised me as Ogma when he was like, "Oh, so the Morgan, she helped make this for you," and he's like, "Who's that?" And it's like, "Oh, you don't know about the Morgan? Okay, then we're gonna go into
Allow
this."
me to introduce you. And it's like,
Yes, exactly. Here you go. You're gonna love this one. So yeah, and so DP was really all over that, and I was happy to kind of weave that in as well because it was kind of really like last minute, like, oh, do you want her to introduce it and that sort of thing. So I just thought that I'd have Ogma basically say, oh yeah, and this is kind of like your spooky aunt, and here you go. So,
Wow, you just like answered 3 of our questions all at once.
oh, that's what I do.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
kind
I
of impressive.
anticipated the questions you would ask, and then I,
Right,
gave you
you're
the
just all ahead of it.
classic
Oh, of course.
Ogma.
You knew all the
Classic
questions before we
Ogma.
asked them.
Yep,
Yep.
yep. Well, here's one you didn't answer, so I'll handle this one. Considering you guys are both playing a White Wolf product, what's your favorite White Wolf product? I will also accept World of Darkness products, Onyx Path products, just anything that's in that sort of storyteller D10 gritty adventure type of game.
Oliver, you go first.
All right. That's the thing. I haven't got the opportunity to play around with all too many. I've had Scion and then a little bit of Wave or not Wafer. That was the game I was in. But the Hunter. And there's only two. What got me into them in the beginning though is like an interest in Vampire the Masquerade. But like that's what opened the doors to all these other different products. But I still have yet to actually try out Vampire the Masquerade, which is funny. So I'd say so far between the two that I have played, I'd give it to Scion. It's just been really, really enjoyable.
I am definitely a vampire first type person. So yeah, I'm like, yeah, a vampire, and especially the V5 version. I was familiar with the 20th anniversary edition version, but V5 really captured my heart with the hunger mechanic and all that stuff. I'm like, oh, okay, this was a really nice. Somebody came up with a good idea here.
Yeah.
And because it really emphasizes the whole like the blood is everything type of thing for
Mhm, mhm.
vampires. Not only that, but I have a personal fondness for vampires. So it's just like, and vampires are always cool. Like they print money. You're right. I mean, if Stephanie
Yeah.
Meyer can make money off of vampires, anybody can. So, like, I mean, anybody can do that. So
Shade
they're
on
just
Stephanie Myers right there.
they're just eternally cool. So like, it's just like sit down. Any of you out there who have ever had any kind of inklings whatsoever of writing your own fan fiction or anything else, if you never needed any kind of push to do that, I mean, I'm here to give you that. I mean, basically, like, yeah, I mean, she made it, so can you, so by way
Well,
of taking a shot across the bow there at an author who made vampires sparkle, I think
Yeah.
I'm justified. So
I mean, let's be real. Stephanie Myers is just the teenage version of Anne Rice. Like,
right,
yeah.
exactly. So I think pretty much they're just perpetually eternally cool. So I'll stand vampires all day long every day. So
Heard it here
um
folks. Write about vampires.
yes, exactly. Right about vampires. And
from
but
sorry, go ahead. No, you're not done. Go ahead.
I also have played Mage, and of course Scion, and I've really just kind of cast it about with a whole. If somebody's like, "Hey, you want to play this?" I'm up for it because I'm like, "Hey, this is something new and it could be fun." I've also played Onyx Path's new. They came from beyond, whatever
Mhm,
series, like the Grave, or they
Yeah.
came from Camp Murder Lake. I played in things like that. But yeah, my heart, if somebody like basically said you can only have one, like my heart would always go back to vampire. So but I'm ready to play anything like Call of Cthulhu and all that other stuff too. Like it's just like, for me it's
Yeah.
always a new experience and always a new game to play. So
My a friend of mine, Michael Barker, works on the They Came From series. So I do like that one myself. But I will say from a design perspective, comparing the versions of Vampire, you're absolutely right. The way that the hunger mechanic works in V5 is pretty slick,
It's
especially
chef's
in comparison
kiss.
to the previous versions of how hunger and like blood worked in the previous versions. This way, smooth, very smooth.
Definitely.
But
And
on the note of game design, sorry, I do have a question for both of you. So if we're not talking about White Wolf products, what is your favorite RPG system of all time? And it better be Maximum Apocalypse. I'm just kidding.
Hmm. Well, I went
I'll
first
let
last time. No, I went first last time. So
I just feel like I don't want to like talk too long, so I like to like bounce it back and forth. But okay, I'll go first. Um, honestly, I for a long time, of course, I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons, and fifth edition I think is a good iteration of that. Although I started off with Advanced Dungeons and Dragons second edition,
Oh, okay.
so I had all the books for that and everything else, all the handbooks that they used to do for that and everything. So, and I also worked my way through third edition, the other ones. So, but fifth
The other
edition, I
one,
think
yeah, we don't talk about
the
the
other
other one.
one we don't talk about. Yeah.
does not exist.
I'm glad you picked up on that. But so just from a design developer's perspective, but no hate there. It's just one of those things where I think fifth edition is actually a pretty decent
Everyone knows when you count, it goes 1, 2, 3, 3.5, 5.
right,
Exactly.
exactly. I'm
Exactly.
glad we're all in agreement on that.
How it's
So
always been.
right,
It's the
exactly.
same with Shadowrun. Like there was a fourth edition, but we don't talk about it.
Right. I am here for like, the different attempts. I mean, you never know. Like I'm there, for example, like the Chronicles, the New World of Darkness stuff also has its core fan base and everything like that. So I don't
Hmm.
begrudge anybody their
Hmm.
their
Sure.
particular editions that they're fond of. I mean, if it works, they tried a different way, it works for a particular group of people, and that's cool.
everyone
So
is allowed to be wrong.
yeah, I wasn't gonna say it like that. uh
Well,
yeah,
we've
so
we've had some off the air discussions about the fan base of Onyx Path and the Chronicles of Darkness people. So we totally understand.
I can definitely see that. But
Yeah.
anyways, so yeah, Dungeons and Dragons for the longest time. And so my breadth of games hasn't been maybe perhaps as great as the rest of you. But yeah, Dungeons and Dragons and Vampire are primarily my two, but also like in the past 3-4 years, I've also like spread out into all kinds of games and any opportunity I can get into. One that I'd like to play is Cyberpunk Red. That's a new
That's
or
the
at
new
least
one, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's a new tabletop version of that. I'd love to get into a game of that too. So like
Mm.
that's one that I saw at one of the expos I went to recently, and the group that just kind of did a session of that like was really good at it and everything like that. So I was like, oh, I could be interested in this. This sounds really fun. So yeah.
Let me try to convince you to play Beta Red instead.
Okay. Hey, I'm
Just
here
pitching
for
my products. It's all good. It's all good.
that.
Just joking around.
Yeah.
What about you, Gary?
Um, See, yeah, like so much of my time as a tabletop player has been within like the D&D 5e subspace, and in recent years I've been really trying to branch out, see what other games there are. So it's kind of funny that you mentioned New World Darkness, Chronicles of Darkness, because that was my initial first introduction into the kind of White Wolf sphere of things. And it's really fun because I ran a whole campaign of Chronicles of Darkness that was a Mortals game. It was just Mortals, but because like I didn't know about any of the other stuff. I wasn't aware of the other like supplementary books. So I was just kind of like, all right, there's just gonna be regular people. We're gonna have to like fight this cult or whatever, I guess. Yeah, sure, why not? And so then I found out about everything else, and I was like, oh, there's like an entire new world going on here on like multiple levels.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah, there was that, and I just been trying to find a lot of different tabletop games recently. There's a book series I really enjoy called the Mistborn series, and it has its own
Mm-hmm.
tabletop game, and I've been running a campaign for some of my friends on that, and it's been a really good fun time. Um, And then yeah, there's all this new stuff with White Wolf, but I really need to find more cool, fun tabletop games out there. So I'm all about listening to you guys talk about them. I really enjoyed when we did the chill one shot. That was a cool system
Yeah.
as well. But yeah, so, since I'm still in kind of like this exploratory phase, I feel bad that I have to say D&D 5e is my favorite because it's like the most like basic. This is your starting point system answer, but that's all I have for now because I haven't had enough time to fully uh, put my fingers around in the whole tabletop subspace.
That's all right. How old are you there, Gary?
I'm 21.
Yeah, see, you're totally fine at that age. I am now 38 and 21. Yeah, I had very few under my belt as well, so you're fine. You're doing fine.
Appreciate it.
Spring chickens. Damn kids, get off my lawn.
So you got a question, I hope.
I
We
do.
took all your time. Yeah.
No,
We
how
took all
dare
your
you.
time.
Yeah. Dyvir, how did you manage to become an SPC for Hallowed Haven, aside from being the crotchety old man, it seems?
So I basically like I can't remember like a casting call or whatever like that PP sent out. I don't know. It feels like a year ago now. Like it was a while ago. Um, Time is weird, but yeah. So like it was the I guess it was like the survey or something like where you like filled it all out and you said where your lines of veils were and all that stuff and like which pantheon and what would you like to play, and then we had uh, she reached out to me and we had an interview, um, and said, tell me a little bit about your background, your gaming history and everything like that, and it was a really cool fun time. And then a few weeks later it was like, okay, we're gonna make you an SPC, and it was really just kind of like that's kind of how it happened, and I was like, cool. I knew that at the time like I had a few other things going on, and uh my work was just really laying it on. It was like I was pretty strained for free time. So when she told me you're going to be an SPT, that's like that is perfect because like it allows me to be flexible here. I only have to show up the one time, which is of course ironic because the first episode, the way it was originally going to happen, was that Oliver would meet with Ogma the same episode as all the other ones did, but that was the one weekend where I was like at a conference. I'm like, if it was any other weekend, there'd be no conflict from here until like summer. And like, it was like that was the only weekend at all that I had any conflict. And of course, that was the one that was scheduled to appear. And we worked this out like a couple 2-3 weeks ahead of time. And so it was like, okay, let's like figure out a way to make him arrive fashionably late. And so we moved him around, and that's why Oliver was kind of like told about his dad by way of one of the other characters or one of the other NPCs, and so yeah, that's why that was kind of like out of sync there a little bit. Of course, we just worked it all out that Ogma would be with the rest of the gods anyway. Like he needed to be there, planning and being his strategy god self and all that stuff, and so she worked really knitted that together in a way that was not actually what the original plan was. So yeah, that was kind of how it worked out. And for me, I've played SPCs and I've also done like one shots, which are nice. For me, it's less like I think that tabletop role playing in general has gotten a huge boost in terms of like the amount of streaming that people have been able to do and all that stuff. Like if you turn the clock back even 10 years, like I don't think the popularity is quite what it is now.
Turn it back
Because
5 years.
right, exactly. I was being
Yeah.
conservative there, but yeah, I think you could even say 5 years. But like, yeah, that it's a relatively new thing, and I think it's definitely on the back of like the option of like being able to stream and things like that. People can not only get people together over the internet, but also other people can watch. Which I think I credit streaming for anyway, and that sort of thing. So, yeah, I definitely think that having that opportunity and being able to be in a number of different games, which being an SBC or doing one shots allows a lot more because people have jobs and everything, and
Mhm.
it's hard to get them together week after week all the time. So for me, it's like, yep, this is cool. I get to do like 3 other things, and I get to jump in and be part of Scion Apotheosis too, once or twice. So hopefully again, I can hear that there's an inclination from our character here to have, to get together and have a book talk, session with dear
Yeah,
old
no,
dad. So
I think it would be cool.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is pay attention to the casting calls in the chat. That's what I'm hearing for
yeah,
another
absolutely.
SBC. Yeah.
For sure. When they go out, jump on them and really take the time to, fill out that thing. Be open to like doing either one. Like, if you don't get the character, whatever. Like I said, it's a chance to try something new, and
Mhm.
that's what I've been doing. I've really had a very fortunate time being a part of a number of different projects and being able to stream and that sort of thing. I want to mention one other one here, the Tantertail Veils. That ran here and was streamed, and that was super fun for me too. So like, just be open-minded, be willing to try new things, and especially with the lower um, the lower requirements of like an SPC or a one-shot type of thing really make for a nice dip your toes in and have a good time once or twice, low stakes type of thing. That's what I would say to anybody who's like we are, like, I mean, most of us come from Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, and it's one of those things where, if you're looking to spread out, but you're worried that you won't know the system well enough. I mean, playing a character one time or doing a one shot is a nice little way of saying, hey, I'm just gonna like try this out and
Sure.
have some fun.
All right. Well, now that we've got, we've been percolating, it's time to drink our cups. So, Gary, the chat wants to know what is on Oliver's audiobook playlist. Like, what is it?
So many things. There's just like a lot of the whole classic literature books. Many that like Gary, have not read, but Oliver most certainly has probably already read multiple times. But it's like I need to listen to it now to get a different perspective through the narration. So I could pull up just a list of classic literature books and just pick and choose ones that Oliver would have, but we'd be here all day.
I mean, I think that's what the chat was asking, but yeah, we'd be here all day. So let's
Yeah, no
let's
time
not.
for that.
Yeah.
You'll find out slow and surely as he continues to suggest things in the car.
Fair enough. So,
Skip
Diver.
those questions. Obviously, Diver, you answered a bunch.
I decided to answer everything.
Yeah.
Diver,
Sorry, I didn't mean to.
That's fine. I have a question for you that kind of actually plays a little bit into what Gary was saying about how Oliver is a tactician, but it also has to deal with his gas. What do you think would make Ogma most proud of Oliver? Playing to his strengths as a tactician, or having the confidence to fulfill his chaos and punch someone to death?
That's a great question. Inhabiting that character's mind space, I have to believe that he would be proud either way. Ogma had it got into like a stone throwing contest at one point and was like, he lost it, but it was like he's super strong. And so like throwing rocks is definitely something he does apart from like knowing everything and creating languages. He also throws rocks in his spare time. So like giant boulders. So he would I think he would be pretty proud of both of that. But if like I said, if I had to choose one, like he wants Oliver to be doing what he's doing right now. He wants Oliver to kind of uh, use his intellect and his learning to help guide the group, to be supportive of the group, to see things that others might miss, and to provide insights that they might not have. But going along with punching somebody in the face. Like he wants Oliver, and this is why like he mentioned Coda at the time, because there's always this dynamic between Oliver and Coda to have him like really step into the huge shoes he's trying to fill and basically own his scion Gaius and everything. And so uh he would like to see Oliver basically step to the fore, more often than not, and be ready to wield the knowledge and intellect that he has in a confident manner. So he's like, you got the book learning, you got the education, you got the gifts here, you got the intellect, and that's nothing to sneeze at. That's not nothing at all. Like that's intimidating all by itself. And so you and I also I'm a personal fan of like the creative move he did, which I think is one of Oliver's all-time best things that happened in, like, I think it was episode 1 or 2, one of the early ones, where he's basically just created a whirlwind of like Shakespeare. Just,
Yeah. Shakespeare vanish, right?
Yes, exactly. It was like throw up an entire, like just rip apart an entire anthology and throw it into the air to create this like whirlwind of pages. And I just thought that was so fucking cool. So yeah, that he would want him to do more things like that. I think that was a nice touch, and that's why when they met, I had him bring that up, because he was like, yeah, that was a pretty creative way to wield Shakespeare. So,
And honestly, one of my favorite aspects about playing Oliver is just really leaning into this concept of his like own personal self-doubt and lack of confidence in himself, because the way it's progressing is I really enjoy it, because starting out it's just kind of like not even a big deal to Oliver. It's just kind of like, no, I let other people do their thing. It's fine. I'll take a step back. But as it keeps coming up, be like, hey, you're cool. You do cool things. He has to keep refuting it. And because he can't allow himself to accept it for his own inner turmoil reasons. And then the more he refutes, the more people keep telling him and trying to reinforce it on him. And then he has to keep refuting it. It just becomes more and more and more, and eventually it's going to reach a breaking point for Oliver, where it's going to go one of two ways, where he's either going to finally accept what they say about him and step up like everyone wants him to do, or something else entirely is going to happen. I'm really excited to see where it goes.
Yeah, and as far as off the cuff things, this actually leads me to a few questions I have for you, man. Firstly, what do you have against gas station sushi, huh?
I don't think it's a very safe option if you enjoy your regular bowel movements. I just, if you like to live life on the edge, enjoy. But I like to live life hygienically.
Yeah, just you kept referencing it, and it made me think of that episode of Futurama, right?
I don't think I've seen that episode.
Oh, you haven't seen the one where he eats the gas station tuna sandwich, and it creates like the colony of worms in his body?
No, I have not seen that one. I've seen a lot of Futurama. I have not seen that one.
I've also not seen that one, but that sounds peak Futurama right there.
Yeah, it really is. You should watch it. It's very good.
I mean, now that it's been introduced, I think a colony of worms needs to make an appearance at some point. So,
well, they make Fry stronger and more intelligent because he's the host and trying to keep him alive.
Isn't that just a Pathfinder swarm that walks?
But and then on along with that, what the hell, man? I thought this was a family show. Why are you swearing in the episodes?
Oh,
yeah, what the hell?
Well, when a god is harassing you and forcing you to say things you don't want to due to their horrific godly presence, you don't really get a choice in the matter, man. You really don't get a choice. And there's also all the peer pressure aspect of it, getting you to like say ASS. It's I don't know. Like, don't point fingers at me.
I mean, what does Ogma have to say about him suddenly dropping F-bombs and saying ASS and all kinds of things?
Ogma thinks that Oliver's coming along in his progress pretty well. I mean, look, Ogma of all people is going to say that colorful language is just part of the language. So, he wrote those words. Like he was the original carving into the bathroom stall type of person, like he's like, yep, this is a new word and it's going to be a bad word and we're going to have it in the language and yeah, we're going to use it. So, the fact that Oliver is expanding his vocabulary and his usage of certain words is I think Ogma would approve. He would sagely nod, and go, "Oh, good. You're finally making use of all the language now."
They have all the language letters. Fuck. They have all the words in the vocabulary. I'm going to use all the words in the vocabulary.
That's right. You're not going to just leave some to the side, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
no.
that's not what we're here for. We're here for total creative expression. So
Indeed.
good for you, Oliver. Continue to use the bad words.
We'll see. See if that peer pressure keeps up.
I always thought it was funny. I'm just going to jump in here and say, I always, from the beginning, so Oliver's like one of the older ones, I think.
He's 27.
Yeah. And I think this came up. I don't know what the ages of the other scions are necessarily.
Chris is 30.
Chris is
mentioned
in
the last episode.
nearing 30. So I think Chris is older. Dakota's definitely younger. I have no idea where Sarah sits on it though.
Yeah, I don't know either. Yeah, I mean, I figured Chris always throws off this impression of like this kind of weathered, worldly Viking type. But Oliver is coming from a position here that, at least in regular society and everything, is usually one of authority. So it's just like, I mean, as someone who's somewhat involved in education circles and things like that, I would say that it's like, okay, taking authority in, like, for example, the classroom and everything is just totally part of the job. Like, that's what you have to do. You got unruly teenagers and you really kind of have to establish, where those lines are and everything. And so it's funny because Oliver is like he's having to wrestle with like assuming that responsibility and authority with this group, even though like in his own position, what he just does for day to day is like, it would basically put him in a position of authority over others and things like that. So it's an interesting dynamic that
No, I agree.
that he's struggling with that, which I totally am here for. Like, I totally embrace that, like the contradictions that make characters very interesting. But it's just funny to see like his former student, for example, like, man, you really need to like own it. You need to step up. You need to swear.
It's a great dynamic, and I think a big cause for it is that the other three, they're like such these colorful, outrageous characters who are so great in all their own ways, and Oliver is just like the biggest square imaginable. Like he's very seclusionary. He doesn't drink. He doesn't swear. The dude's never even been in a relationship before. He's just such a square, and so he's in a situation where he's constantly being surrounded people by who aren't the opposite of it, and they're pushing for him to like not be one either. And so it's a tough situation for him. Things are going to develop because of it.
Yeah, exactly. Like he's the square. I couldn't put it better. Like he probably goes to bed at 9 p.m. at night. He doesn't do any of this drinking or smoking or anything like that. He's certainly helping the environment by not having a car. And I imagine he's just square Oliver, and he's kind of adorable that way too. He provides a lovely foil to the other three.
Yes. Oh, they're just trying so hard to like sandpaper down those square edges. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes they have to apply a little bit extra pressure.
But they're doing it.
Every now and then
it makes those moments when Oliver does break out like all the more special. Like, it's just like when he starts saying, just dropping F-bombs everywhere, or when he does something that is on point, like either more confident or something like that. It really does help those moments to shine a little bit more because his character is so out of character for him.
Mm-hmm.
Saul, do you want to ask a question?
I
They're
do
doing,
actually. Now that
they're doing a pretty good job of
yeah,
like
they're
keeping.
doing a pretty good job of,
Yep.
of doing their jobs for us, but
So true.
You guys can leave if you want. We'll take it from
Oh,
there.
that's fine.
Oh,
Yeah, we'll
that's
take it.
fine. Well,
Yeah,
lock
we'll
up
just
ahead.
talk
Just
shop
lock up
over
ahead of time.
coffee. Yes.
You got the bill though, right?
Oh yeah, Ogma never pays.
That makes sense. So another fun chat question for both Ogma and Oliver: book recommendations for non-readers that enjoy comic book movies.
That's a good question.
Mm. Are we answering as ourselves or as Oliver and Ogma?
Well, I think it was intended for Oliver and Ogma, but if you have some,
Okay.
I mean, throw
Well,
them
I
in.
just wanted to make it clear because that would change drastically how I'm going to answer.
For sure.
Let's see. As Oliver, since he is a high school English teacher and he is very much aware of how much his students tend to hate reading, he normally would probably typically try to pick things that they can actually kind of get into. So while Gary, have personal feelings about this book, he would probably pick Catcher in the Rye for a more high school crowd because they tend to relate to it far better, so they can get into it quite a bit easier. Naturally, he wouldn't pick anything super contemporary or like fantasy based or anything because that's not his wheelhouse, but it most certainly is mine. Um, Treasure Island might be one he recommends because that's a fun one, at least to him. Um, Bit juvenile to him as well, but he's not like hoity-toity about it. If people like it, then he's just happy that they like it. Uh, One that would probably verge on the kind of fantasy realm that Oliver can kind of get behind just because of how much of an impact it had would probably be things like Dune and Lord of the Rings, just because to him there is a very scholarly aspect to both those books and how they jumpstarted modern fantasy and sci-fi. So he'd probably have no problem recommending those. And a final one probably be like To Kill a Mockingbird. He thinks that would probably be a good recommendation one.
I think Ogma would just go straight to like graphic novels and things, things like that. He would totally recommend any of the graphic novels for anything like, I don't know, like Marvel and DC characters, but also something specific, maybe, I don't know, like Watchmen, or for example, The Sandman, or something like that. No, if there's a graphic novel version of American Gods, but that might be something he would recommend with a little bit of a smirk. Something like Persepolis or Full Metal Alchemist or Akira or any of that stuff. He would totally go all, because for him, it's all like, I don't know, maybe the way I see Agma is that he would embrace all of the kind of literature, and he would totally be up on any new forms of it, and uh, so any new types of iterations of the way old works are being reborn and reimagined uh, in new formats and new mediums, especially of the written word of any kind, whether it's with illustration or whatever. I think he would totally be 100% behind. I think he was
Yeah.
like, yeah, he wants that. He wants language to continue living on. He wants it to, and given that, and I focus on the written because that's kind of what he's known for. So
Yeah.
I think he would start there. Like, of course, oral language has been around in every culture forever, but yeah, I think he would focus on the written versions of it, um, that it are as new as anything. He's not going to just stay with one particular type of genre or one particular type of written stuff. So I think graphic novels are something he would totally go with too.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, this is just fine by me. And
Yeah, I mean, it depends kind of on the graphic novel, but as a comic book fan, as a guy who's going to do a panel on comic books tomorrow, I absolutely know that like while people may trash on it, like the graphic novel is actually pretty good. Like Promethea is a wonderful. It's 5 issues, and it's a great story, and it's a classic like hero's journey kind of tale. So like there would be no reason why Ogma wouldn't recommend that, or like Batman Year Zero, or like The Darkest Night, or
Absolutely.
some other graphic novel that tells a story.
Yeah, and anything that really brings in any new readers and any new lovers of the language, like, in any format, he's going to be like, "Yep, welcome. Here you go. I got this and this and this and this for you." And yeah, I think he would be the first to recommend graphic novels as a format, and would not consider them to be any less of a format than maybe what we might consider traditional novels. For sure, he
Mhm.
would be like, "Yep, this is modern era stuff, and this is what we're going with, and it's absolutely kicks ass. So
Mhm.
here you go."
Something I would
There
like
you
to
go.
clarify as well, because I know you did say non-readers. It's just Fingers Fulver. He does not read graphic novels. Canonically, all he's got is Beige Squad. So like that's all he can really recommend. Maybe he'd recommend like Mouse as well. Actually, that would be
There you go.
one maybe. But other than that, he would just kind of be like, these are some easier books to get into if you're a non-reader wanting to get into reading. So here you go. Sorry, I can't give you like graphic novels or comic books or anything.
Well,
Me, on the
I
also,
other
haven't, I
hand,
haven't read them. I don't know what you're
yeah.
talking about.
I'm kind
Are
of
they
similar.
good?
I'm kind of similar. I'm trying to get into them recently. I really enjoy like Daredevil as a concept for like superhero Marvel stuff, and so I've been reading the Frank Miller run for him. But that's
Yeah.
about all I got as well. So
Yeah, I mean, when you get into like the serials, it changes like dynamics, but there are whole books, like Nameless is just one I can throw off the top of my head, or like Uzumaki by Junji Ito, that are
mhm.
the whole graphic novel is one book, right? Like it's not a continuation of like someone's long story. And so yeah, absolutely. I could see those being recommended by someone like Ogma, or even Oliver if he was like, "Oh, hey, there are ways to read without being like infantile, essentially."
Yeah, and he's aware of that, and it's just like not his realm of expertise, but he's
Sure.
aware that there are various different ways to read and various different ways to use the language, and he's very fascinated with all that, and he's very supportive of all that. Like he does not mind like new uses of slang or even swearing from other people because he finds that to be very inventive use of language and how linguistics is constantly evolving, and he's very fascinated by all of that. So it's just he's not very good at keeping up with all those things.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
like
I
when
think,
his kids start throwing around the word "riz," he's like, I don't know what that means, but great for you guys.
yeah, I think Ogma would totally. He would give Oliver a few points for the audiobook format too. Like,
Yeah.
that's another way to have people be introduced to the great works, as it were. And is something that you can do while on a long trip, as this group so often is. And it's become kind of an adorable little thing that they do, that Oliver suggests an audiobook of. I don't know. What was the last one he suggested? I can't remember.
Uh, there was two. I think the first one was "Call of the Wild" by
Yeah, I
Jack London.
remember
He
that.
said that specifically because he thought it would get Coda on his side because it's about like a dog being out in the wilderness, and so he thought that would work. But what didn't cross his mind is that she might not know what it's about at all in the first place because he's in his own head like that. And another one he mentioned, which was Absalom Absalom by William Faulkner, which I knew no one would even know about or be behind whatsoever. But to Oliver, it's like, yeah, no, this is a great one. We should do
This is a
this.
great one. Yeah, William Faulkner, like Sound and the Fury. We can do that next.
Yeah. But
Yeah, I
Oliver's
mean,
definitely very defensive about the audiobook format, especially like against people who say like that's not actual reading, where he's like before the
well, yeah,
modern era, that was just the way people read. Not everyone, even like high status people, weren't literate. They read books because they had people read to them. So
yeah.
audiobooks are
I was,
just how, if anything, audiobooks is the classic way of doing it. So
Absolutely.
he's all
and
about
and
consuming literature in any way, shape, or form.
I was gonna say like it's interesting because it's almost like an advertisement for the audiobook. Because Audible would say that like the average reader, they say they have stats, and it's like the average reader reads like 5 to 10 books a year, whereas the average audiobook reader reads like goes through like 15 books a month.
Yeah.
And
Oh
so
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's circumnavigate. Now we're getting into like what I actually do, like as a person,
I mean,
and
well,
you
I
know,
study literature, so this is like, whoa.
yeah, yeah. Like research has definitely demonstrated as a way, like honestly, like teachers have been encouraged, especially in the last 20 years and everything else, to adopt different formats and things like that, because a lot of students come to books like that are difficult, like Shakespeare and everything else, that are meant to be seen. Shakespeare was not read
Yeah.
initially; it was seen and heard. It was not,
Mm.
So I mean, nobody's going to dispute that Shakespeare wrote the language with a love for the language, but it's one of those things where it was a play. It was
Yeah.
not meant to be sat down and read. It was meant to be seen on stage. So
And
it's
that's
like,
something I mentioned as Oliver in the very first episode. And the tip that I used for where like he had the students acted out using like the floppy rulers as
yes.
swords and stuff. I actually lifted that directly from one of my high school English teachers because
The
that's what she did
iconic
for us, and
floppy rulers.
yeah, because that's what she did for us, and it got us really into it. We actually cared and listened to the story, and we had fun with it because we got to just like stand in front of the classroom and act out the play and be as goofy and silly with it as we wanted to, and everyone was into it. Everyone paid attention, so I was like, this is something Oliver would definitely do.
Yeah,
Right.
my
And it's
my teacher did with Romeo and Juliet, had like explained all of the slang and like insults to us. So it was like, oh,
Yeah,
they're just like throwing insults at each other. Cool, cool, cool.
yeah, that's what
absolutely
we
like Act
do
One,
as well.
Scene One. Yeah. It's like
Yeah.
Yeah, like
Romeo
we
and
would
Juliet is
act it
all
out.
sex jokes. Yeah.
Yeah, like we would act it out, and then she would stop us and be like, "Yeah, so this means this. This is what's going on." We'd be like, "Oh, that's so funny," and then we would keep
Yes.
going, and it would bring like a new light to it.
It's
Mhm.
hard to make a joke like last 400 or 500 years, like,
Yeah.
this is written,
Like, I
like,
love the opening scene to Romeo and Juliet, where it's like, "You bite your thumb at me?" It's like, "Oh, I just bite my thumb, sir." You bite your thumb at me? I'm just biting my thumb."
right? But it goes all the way back. Like you go all the
Yeah.
way back to like the Iliad or the Odyssey, like those, before Homer put those down, they were literally recited for hundreds of years before they were put into written form. So
Mhm.
like that this goes all the way back to any kind of written story we have, is chances are for at least a few hundred years prior to that, it was told over and over again, recited and memorized by people who enjoyed and performed that.
Well, I think we might be a little off topic and almost out of time. Do we
Oh,
have any final questions there, Saul?
I actually have a kind of a fun one.
Yeah, let's do it.
What did Oliver do when he found out about Coda suspension?
Womp womp.
what did he do? I think Oliver was certainly touched when he found out about it and the reason why, but being the person that he is, he didn't want to um, embarrass her or make her view him differently or make her feel as if she had to behave differently around him. So he kind of kept it to himself for a while and just continue on as normal. But it was definitely something he remembered and always remembered, and eventually did bring up and confess to her about knowing in the first place. But when he initially found out, it was just kind of a very like, oh, it's good to see that she actually does care, because it was something that we worked out that she kept up this attitude in his class as if it's like, no, I don't really care about this, whatever. And him finding out, it's like, ah, so she does care. Good to know.
Wow, what a good guy.
Right?
Yeah.
Which is kind of how it happens a lot,
Mhm.
like sometimes, like person is not ready, or they're not in the headspace at that time, but then they come to appreciate later. I've seen that like firsthand.
Wow, such a heartwarming way to end the episode. Well, thanks, guys, for being on the episode. And
Yes.
for those of you that are listening to this, these episodes drop on Thursdays at noon for the $5 and up tier on the Hallowed Haven Patreon. They release the public 1 month later, as both Gary and I were talking about beforehand, since, people have to wait to hear us talk, and then they get to hear us ramble on for an hour about audiobooks. But think about subscribing so you can be up to date with your talk news for Hallowed Haven. Otherwise, you're coming at us 1 month after the fact, which is no news at all at that point. But that's it. Thanks, everyone, for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Bye now.
Bye.
Bye bye.